Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with garlic shrimp. That's right, there's about 15,000 garlic shrimp recipes in the world, so there's no such thing as the garlic shrimp recipe, but this is my garlic shrimp recipe, and I think it's extremely delicious and I'd love to show you, so here is what we do. So this is one of those recipes you're going to want to get all your ingredients ready ahead of time. The foodies call that mise en place. Us regular folks, we call it prep, which is shorter and much less French. So we're going to need a pound of shrimp, peeled and deveined, some fresh Italian parsley, freshly chopped, lots of garlic. If you use less than 6 cloves for a pound of shrimp, don't call it garlic shrimp. I also have some red pepper flakes and some lemon juice. And then the most top secret ingredient ever for garlic shrimp, the brine from a jar of capers. Oh, and by the way, quick tip, if you spill some on the table, just move the ramekin on top of it. It's like it never happened. Anyway, I'm going to put about a tablespoon of caper brine in the lemon juice, and it's going to give it that little secret something that will have your foodie friends talking behind your back, which is really the ultimate goal. And last but never least, we need some cold butter cut in 4 pieces. Okay, after the prep is done, we're going to put our best, heaviest skillet on the highest heat you have. Crank that sucker up full blast. Into the pan, we're going to add some olive oil, and we need to get this stuff hot, really hot. So highest heat, we want to make sure the bottom's coated, and we're going to stand there with shrimp in one hand, tongs in the other, and we're going to wait till we see the first wisps of smoke. And I know what you're thinking. I heard it's not healthy to let olive oil smoke. You're absolutely right. All right, but for this recipe, you need to, and it's okay. Don't let it start burning, but as soon as you see that first wisp of smoke, add the shrimp in, even them out, and then don't do anything. Just let them sizzle for a minute untouched. While they're sizzling, I want you to sprinkle them with salt. All right, we don't need any pepper because we have the red chili flakes. And after about a minute, I want you to toss them and basically do a little bit of a, kind of like a stir fry type action for another minute. And at that point, the shrimp are not going to be cooked all the way through, all right, but they're going to be about halfway. So you're going to have a little bit of color on the outside, but the inside is still going to be sort of translucent. And when they look like that, I'm going to go ahead and add my garlic and my chili flakes, and we're going to stir that in and cook the garlic. Now, this is only going to take about a minute. We're going to really keep it moving. We're not going to let the garlic brown at all. And since this is only going for like a minute, that shouldn't be a problem. So just keep kind of tossing it, stirring it, tossing it, stirring it. And after 1 minute, it's going to look something like that. We're going to go ahead and quickly dump in the lemon juice, caper brine mixture, 1 of the 4 chunks of butter, and half our parsley. Okay? We're going to save the other half to put on top fresh. All right, we're going to stir all that together. I'm going to switch to a big spoon here. And as soon as I see that first piece of butter's melted, I'm turning the heat down to low. We're going to toss in the rest of the butter. And when that's melted, you are ready to eat some unbelievably delicious garlic shrimp. All right, you're going to taste and adjust for seasoning. I didn't even need to tell you that, but I had like 6 seconds to kill. All right, and this is fantastic on any kind of starch, pasta, rice, potatoes, etc. But I like it on toast. So I had some Meyer lemon bread. How good does that sound? Some Meyer lemon bread that I toasted. I topped it with my garlic shrimp. And then it's time for that amazing sauce. Now mine got a little thick as I was portioning my shrimp out. So no worries. Put a little splash of water until that sauce texture is just to your liking. All right, if you need to blast it with a couple seconds of heat, go ahead. You're going to spoon over the sauce. Oh yeah, unreal. I hate when chefs say, I wish you could smell this, but you know what? That's right. I wish you could smell this. You're definitely going to want to top with some fresh parsley. That's why we save so much. So be generous with that. And there you go. Garlic shrimp. So incredibly simple. Just sweet shrimp. That big punch of garlic right in your face. The acid from the lemon. The herbaceous parsley. Just a classic combination. And one I think you're going to have a very hard time not making after watching this video. Perfect for a quick weeknight dinner or, that's right, a fancy occasion. It's just one of those dishes that works anytime, any place. People love it. As long as you have your stuff prepped ahead of time, super easy recipe. Anyway, I hope you give that a try. Head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more information as usual. And as always, enjoy.
Spanish garlic shrimp. That's right, this amazing dish ranks at or near the top of many of my favorite recipe lists. Like favorite Spanish recipes, and favorite garlic recipes, and favorite fast recipes, and of course favorite shrimp recipes. I mean, this even makes my list of favorite recipes to put on multiple lists. And if you've had this before, you know exactly why. And if you haven't, you really need to keep watching. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. And the first thing we're going to need is 1 pound of frozen shrimp. Oh yeah, as you probably heard me say in the past, frozen shrimp is almost always a better choice than fresh shrimp. But anyway, we'll go ahead and thaw and carefully drain 1 pound of shrimp. And then once that's been accomplished, what we need to do is peel these, which is going to be pretty easy if you're buying this style that comes split. And not just split, these have been split and deveined. So all we need to do is peel off the rest of the shell, being careful not to tear off that last little piece of tail meat. And I know it's just a tiny little extra bit of meat, but this looks much better once it's cooked if you don't rip that end off. And I should mention, if you are buying shrimp that are not split and deveined like these, I'll provide a link in the post to show you how to do this from scratch. And of course, we shouldn't be putting these clean ones back in a strainer, but rather we should add these to a mixing bowl. And then what we'll do once our shrimp have been prepped is simply transfer those into the fridge while we pull together the rest of the ingredients, which is not going to take long because there's only a couple of them, with the most important of those being some freshly sliced garlic. So we're not chopping, we're not mincing. We're going to take a small sharp knife and just slice across like this. And please do not be a hero. When this gets too small to slice safely, just simply tip it over on its side and continue slicing like that. And some people freak out if these have started to germinate and there's a little spot of green in the center, which is kind of happening here. And if you want to remove that part, go ahead. But it doesn't really bother me unless it's dark green and really sprouting. But anyway, we'll go ahead and slice up 3 or 4 cloves of garlic. And then above and beyond that in our shrimp, we're also going to need some freshly chopped parsley, as well as some extra virgin olive oil, preferably something from Spain. And then last but not least, a couple tablespoons of sherry wine. And of course you're going to want to use something very nice from Spain, but if you can't find that, just use something very cheap from America, as it really does not matter in this recipe, as long as it's the dry sherry, not a sweet dessert sherry. And then what we're going to want to do before we head to the stove is season this shrimp up with some kosher salt, as well as, and this is totally optional, I'm going to toss in a spoon of hot smoked Spanish paprika, or as I refer to it, the bacon of spices. And once that's in, we'll go ahead and give this a mix to coat. And by the way, I don't think this is in the original recipe, so like I said, it is optional, and you'll have to decide whether to use it or not. I mean, you are, after all, the Neo of your Gambas al Ajillo, but I do recommend it, so I'm definitely going to add it to this matrix. And for me, not only does that add some nice heat, but that little bit of subtle smokiness really, I think, works beautifully with the sauce. And then once that's set, we can head to the stove, where we have a pan set over medium heat. And we'll go ahead and toss in our sliced garlic along with our Spanish olive oil. And sure, that might look like too much oil, but it's not. It's barely enough. Or I'm not sure if you got the memo yet, but it's okay to eat fats. Turns out it's the carbs that are bad. Oh, which reminds me, you want to make sure you toast some bread before this recipe's done. But anyway, what we're going to do is cook this garlic in this oil over medium heat until it just barely starts to turn golden. All right, we don't really want a lot of color on this, but we do want it to soften up a little bit, and we want that oil to be fully infused with that garlic flavor. And generally what I'm looking for is that those thinner slices just start to take on a little bit of color. And also, as you may notice, some of the garlic will actually stick to your tongs. That's another indication it's starting to caramelize. And what we have to do immediately when we see that is add our shrimp in. Otherwise, our garlic's going to overcook. So we'll go ahead and carefully add our shrimp, and also turn our heat up to high, because of course all this chilled meat's going to cool our pan down. And what we'll do over high heat for about 2 minutes is keep these moving continually with our tongs until they curl up but are still undercooked, which, like I said, is literally only going to take 2 minutes. And then what we'll do once your shrimp are looking a little something like this is go ahead and dump in our sherry, which really shouldn't flame up, but be careful anyway. And then what we'll do once our wine is in is simply cook this for another minute, stirring pretty much continually until our sauce comes up to a boil and our shrimp are cooked through. And if everything goes according to plan, it should look a little something like this. And believe it or not, that's it. Once our sauce is boiling and our shrimp is cooked through, we will turn off the heat, toss in some freshly chopped parsley, stir this all together with a spoon, and other than checking for seasoning, we're pretty much ready to serve this up, and possibly a Spanish cazuela that we've lined with some toasted bread. And we'll go ahead and pile those shrimp up, and of course spoon over plenty of that truly amazing sauce. And once I had served that up, I decided to finish off with a little bit of cayenne, as well as a little extra parsley over the top. Except, you know what? I kind of overdid it, and it sort of made the surface of the shrimp look kind of dry. So I decided to fix that by spooning over a little more sauce. And as you're plating this up, you're going to be thinking there is no way this can taste as amazing as it smells. And then it does. I mean, first of all, just these beautiful sweet shrimp, cloaked in that intensely garlicky olive oil, just that is worth the price of admission. But then when you add in the way the heat and a little bit of smoke from the paprika plays off that subtle sweetness from the sherry, it is just nothing short of fantastic. I'm not sure how they say OMG in Spanish, but if I knew, I would have said it here. And if you think the shrimp's good, just wait until you taste that sauce-soaked bread, because that bite right there is otherworldly, just mind-blowingly delicious. But anyway, that's it. My take on Spanish garlic shrimp. One of my all-time favorite things to serve at a tapas party. And if you're not familiar, tapas is simply what the Spanish call small bites of food served with drinks. And they actually have an old saying that there ain't no party like a tapas party, because a tapas party don't stop until you run out of the garlic shrimp. It actually sounds a lot better in Spanish. But anyway, because of everything I've just said, and because of everything you've just seen, I really do hope you give this a try soon. So head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy. Honey garlic shrimp. That's right, do not let that plain, somewhat generic name fool you. While this does sound like something you see on a menu in the food court at the mall, it is actually one of the most exciting and delicious garlic shrimp recipes I know. Plus, it also happens to be extremely fast and simple to make. And if you're a collector of amazing garlic shrimp recipes like I am, this is definitely going to be one you want to add to your collection. And to get started, we're going to need to talk about shrimp, because for this to work properly, we are going to need a pound of raw peeled and deveined shrimp. But they have to be of a certain size. And as you might know, shrimp is usually sold with a number next to it. And the shrimp you see here are actually called 1620s, meaning they're about 16 to 20 shrimp per pound. And as we get into the middle of the video, I'll explain why that's so important. But anyway, we're going to make sure those are fully thawed, well drained, and as dry as possible. And we can go ahead and keep those in the fridge while we move on to make our marinade, which, as the name of the dish would indicate, is going to include a whole bunch of garlic that we have minced up, as well as, of course, a couple tablespoons of honey. And go ahead and use any variety you want, but generally we want something fairly mild in flavor. We are also going to toss in a little touch of freshly grated ginger, as well as between 1 and 2 tablespoons of soy sauce, depending on just how salty you like things. And then we will finish up with our one and only secret ingredient, a very small but important amount of Asian fish sauce, which is going to add a little extra touch of saltiness, along with a surprising amount of savoriness. And that's it. We'll take a whisk and give this a mix. And you know what? I was going to add a little bit of cayenne, but then I decided I didn't want any spice in this. Or I forgot. Okay, there's no way you'll ever really know. And then what we'll do once that's mixed is transfer in our shrimp. And then we will toss that very, very thoroughly with a spatula until every nook and cranny, crack and crevice is filled and covered with that sauce, which is going to take you a couple minutes, so don't be in a hurry. And that's it. Once that's been accomplished, we can go ahead and wrap this in plastic. And then we'll pop it in the fridge to marinate between 30 and 60 minutes. All right, this recipe does not require a very long marination. And if you're going to do that in a bowl like I am, what we'll want to do occasionally is take it out and give it a toss, since the shrimp sitting at the bottom of the bowl are going to be getting more of that marinade than the ones on the top. Or you could, if you want, just throw everything into a zip-top bag, and then you really wouldn't have to. But for such a short marination, I didn't want to waste one. Oh, and in case you're wondering, I guess you can marinate this longer than an hour, but you have to be very careful when you marinate seafood, because the salt in that soy sauce will eventually start to cure the shrimp, and the texture will change. And in my opinion, not for the better. So like I said, for me, the ideal marination time is between 30 and 60 minutes. At which point we can brush our largest nonstick skillet with a couple teaspoons of vegetable oil, and then get that really hot over high heat. And then we'll keep an eye on it, because as soon as we see that first very small wisp of smoke, we will quickly transfer our shrimp in. And it's totally okay if a little bit of that marinade comes with them, but we do not want to pour it all in at this point. All right, what we'll do is reserve that excess liquid, and we'll add it in later. And as we transfer these in, we want to make sure we do it in just a single layer. Just a single layer, just a single layer. By the way, Beyonce loves when I do that. Or at least that's what I assume. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and transfer those in. And like I said, reserve that excess marinade. And what we're going to do is let those shrimp sear on high heat for exactly 2 minutes before we flip them over. And thanks to that honey we added, they should start to take on a beautiful brown color. Okay, not so much that one, or that one. There we go. And the reason we need to use a nice large shrimp here is because if they're too small, they're going to be overcooked by the time we get some nice color on them. Okay, so if I had to pick one key in this recipe, it would be to use sufficiently sized shrimp like this. And then as soon as those have been flipped over, we'll go ahead and dump in the excess marinade. And we will let that second side cook for just 1 minute before turning off the heat. I know it does seem like a very short cooking time, and it is, but that's all that's necessary. Because after a minute we will turn off the heat, and we will flip these over one last time. And just with the residual heat in that pan, that little bit of excess marinade should reduce down to a beautiful glaze. And if everything goes according to plan, about a minute later our shrimp should look like this, which I think are just absolutely gorgeous. And I'm at least 100% sure those are cooked through, which means we can go ahead and serve up on some rice, or the starchy base of your choice. Okay, I have it on good authority these are fantastic with some noodles. And then for a final touch, I went ahead and scattered over some freshly sliced green onions. And that's it, our honey garlic shrimp are ready to enjoy. And as incredibly beautiful as those are, I think they taste even better than they look. For me, these just have the perfect balance between sweet and savory, while still packing a very substantial garlic punch. Oh, and by the way, this version features about half the honey you see in your typical recipe. And that's because shrimp have a natural sweetness that we're just trying to elevate with some extra sweetness. And we are not trying to make candied shrimp, which is how I think a lot of the other recipes turn out, especially those ones at the food court. Oh, and regarding those tails I left on, that you see me handling here with reckless abandon, if you're wondering is it worth the extra effort to get that little bit of extra flavor, I say yes, it totally is. Right, those big fat parts of the shrimp are magnificent, but those little nuggets of sweet meat I'm sucking and pulling and pinching out of the tail are probably my favorite part. Plus, eating with your hands is never not fun. I mean, ask any kid, they'll tell you. But anyway, that's it. What I'm calling honey garlic shrimp. These were so delicious and addictive I could have easily continued on eating the rest. But I decided to stop, so I could get to the part of the video where I tell you, I really do hope you give these a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy. Hawaiian garlic shrimp scampi. That's right, I've received a bunch of requests to make this, and after tasting it, I understand why. And if you're a garlic lover, you're going to want to grab a pen and pull out your bucket list and add this recipe to it. And yes, by the way, scampi does mean shrimp, so this recipe is actually called Hawaiian garlic shrimp. But redundant names aside, I absolutely love this, and I really think you will too. And what we'll do to get started is peel an entire head of garlic. And to do that, I'm going to show you an old trick for doing it all at once by using a couple bowls. And all we need to do is separate the cloves into one bowl. And then once that's done, we'll put the other bowl over the top. And we will give it the old shake-a for about 30 seconds or so. Or until all those peels are knocked off the cloves. Oh, and let me give you a little warning. If you're freakishly strong like I am, I think I might have shaken this a little too hard or a little too long, because it appears that one or two of my cloves broke apart. But forget that. The point is all those peels came off really easily, and we didn't have to peel those one by one. Oh, and I was too lazy to walk over to the sink, but if you pour a little bit of cold water into this bowl, those cloves are really easy to grab out. And then what we'll do once we have about 8 or 10 nicely peeled cloves of garlic is take a knife and chop them up, but not super fine. Okay, we don't want minced garlic here, because what we're going to do next is toast it golden brown in some butter. And if it's too small, there's a chance it could go too far and burn. And when I first start out with this, I'm not just mindlessly chopping down. I'm actually aiming for some of those bigger pieces and going a little bit slowly and deliberately until it looks like I have a lot of consistently sized pieces. And then we can speed up and chop this as small as we want, which, like I said, is not going to be super small. Okay, I think the perfect chop size for Hawaiian garlic shrimp is right about here. And that's it. That is now ready to go into our butter. So what we'll do next is melt 4 tablespoons of butter over medium heat. And we will all take a couple seconds here to watch that butter slide across the pan, which I find very relaxing. And maybe a little too relaxing, since I never focus the camera for the shot of the garlic going in the melted butter. But anyway, once that butter melts and starts to foam up, we'll go ahead and stir in our chopped garlic. And our plan here is to cook this stirring over medium until it turns a beautiful golden brown. And while you don't have to stir constantly, don't go anywhere. All right, golden brown is good, but golden black is not going to work. So we're really going to need to pay attention here and catch it right at that perfect level of toastiness, which for me was right about here. And don't forget, after you turn the heat off, this is going to toast even a little bit more. So you're not going to want to go any farther than this. And then once that's set, we'll pull it off the heat and transfer it into a bowl. And we'll reserve that so we can add it back into the pan once our shrimp are cooked. Speaking of which, what we're going to need here is 1 pound of fully thawed, deveined, but shell-on shrimp, which is usually sold with some kind of name like Easy Peel. And while you can make this with the shell off, that's not how they do it in Hawaii. And by leaving that shell on, you get so much extra flavor. Or at least that's what they officially tell people. Okay, I'm going to be testing that theory later, as I am going to try a second batch without the shells. Oh, and the reason for the paper towels is you want to make sure these are as dry as possible. So make sure you drain these very well and then pat them nice and dry. And then once those are set, the only other component we need is our starchy spicy coating, which is going to be made with a couple tablespoons of rice flour, or if you want regular flour. But rice flour does work better, and it's not that hard to find. All right, just head for the gluten-free aisle. And then to that we will add a tablespoon of regular paprika, plus a teaspoon of the finest cayenne you can find. And then we'll finish up with some salt, at which point we'll simply give that a mix. And once combined, it's ready to toss with our shrimp. So we'll go ahead and remove those paper towels, and then go ahead and sprinkle over that coating mixture. And the reason we're being so generous with that, as well as with our garlic butter mixture, is because if we are using the authentic method, and we're peeling off the shells, a lot of that goodness is not going to be attached to the meat. So we want to make sure we have plenty to go around. But anyway, we'll sprinkle that over, at which point we'll take a big spoon or spatula, or spoonula, and mix these until they are very evenly coated, making sure, of course, every nook and cranny is covered. And that's it. Once those are thoroughly and completely covered in our coating, we will head to the stove to cook these up, which we'll do over medium-high heat in a nonstick pan, in a few tablespoons of olive oil. And a pound of shrimp's going to make 2 portions, and I'm just cooking 1 here, because we do not want to crowd these. Right, we definitely want to use what I call the Beyonce method, which is just a single layer, just a single layer, just a single layer, just a single layer. All right, so if you want to do the whole batch, you got to use a bigger pan. And since we're not going to crowd these, they're only going to take a couple minutes per side. So we'll give that first side about 2 minutes, and then we'll flip them over, and then give the other side about the same. And of course, when I say 2 minutes per side, that's just a guess. All right, you're the one that actually has to decide based on how big your shrimp are. I mean, you are, after all, the Kanaloa of how long to go, brah. But a couple minutes per side is a pretty good guess. Oh, and in case you're wondering, the best size shrimp to get for this dish, I think, are the 21 to 25 per pound size. And then what we'll do once these have been beautifully cooked on both sides is we'll go ahead and toss in our toasted garlic and butter, and we will stir all that together and cook that for about 30 seconds or so, at which point it's going to be ready to serve. And if you enjoy the smell of cooking garlic, which I really, really do, it does not get any better than this. It is just absolutely intoxicating. But anyway, let me pull it together and pull these off the stove so I can serve them up on some white rice, alongside the traditional fresh lemon. And please do not be shy about spooning that toasted garlic and butter over the top. And that, my friends, is nothing short of garlic shrimp heaven. Or in this case, garlic shrimp heaven. So let me go ahead and squeeze over some lemon and dig in. And with the shells on these, you basically have 2 approaches to eating. We can go ahead and pop the whole thing in our mouth, and then spit out the shell once separated. And that method will deliver the maximum amount of flavor, which, by the way, was tremendous. Every once in a while, you get a batch of shrimp where the shells are really, really super thin and paper-like. And this batch was like that. And don't worry, I will go back and eat that meat I left in the tail sections. Oh, and I should mention, just that toasted garlic butter on the rice is pretty much worth making this recipe for all by itself. So good. And yes, at a certain point, I did give up on the one-hand method, which did make things a little bit easier. But anyway, to summarize, Hawaiian garlic shrimp scampi with the shell on is insanely delicious and absolutely one of the best garlic shrimp recipes you'll ever enjoy. Okay, searing these in the shell really does add some flavor and does help keep the shrimp from drying out. But if we're being honest, definitely a little bit of a hassle to eat. So in the name of science, I did a second batch. And other than peeling off the shells, I did everything exactly the same. All right, same garlic butter, same coating, same searing in the pan, same rice, and same fresh lemon. Although I did change the placemat. And in my opinion, I found these to be just as flavorful. All right, just an explosion of garlic shrimpy goodness. And of course, way, way easier to eat. However, there is one major difference. All right, with the authentic method, we're not necessarily supposed to be eating all the coating. which is why we use so much. Whereas here it's seared right onto the shrimp. So that aspect is definitely more pronounced. And we do get somewhat less of a pure garlic and shrimp flavor profile. But when you weigh that against how much easier these are to eat, I think I do prefer these over the authentic shell-on version. And I keep using the word authentic, although I'm not really exactly sure how authentic these are since I've never been to Hawaii. All right, to be honest, I've always been a little bit afraid to go, ever since I saw that Brady Bunch episode when I was a kid. But from what I've seen, what we did was pretty close. So ultimately, if you decide to make these, you're going to have to decide whether to go with the shells or not. But the good news is, no matter which version you make, they are both incredibly delicious, and a must-make for any garlic and or shrimp lover. Which is why I really do hope you give these a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy. Prawn Provencale. That's right, this easy appetizer was inspired by the upcoming Academy Awards, because it's gatherings like that where we want to feature our fanciest hors d'oeuvres. Sure, chips and dips are fine for the Super Bowl, but when George Clooney's accepting the award for Best Jawline in a musical or comedy, we're going to want something a little higher end. And not only are these delicious and kind of fancy looking, they are very easy to make and require prepping just 2 components. Of course, one of those components has 10 ingredients, but still, as you're about to see, pretty easy. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with our garlic herb breadcrumb mixture. And I'm going to do that by transferring some chopped garlic into a mortar, followed by a nice big pinch of kosher salt. We are also going to toss in a pinch of dry oregano, as well as a little pinch of dry thyme. So this mixture is going to feature both dried and fresh herbs. Well, actually fresh herb. Because at this point, I'm also going to toss in a little bit of freshly chopped Italian parsley. And we're actually going to add most of that at the end of this procedure. But I do like to add a little bit here when we smash our garlic to add a little bit of coloration. And then what we'll do before we add our olive oil is grind and smash that garlic down to a paste, which is going to take you a minute or 2. And then what we'll do once that mixture's been smashed and mashed to our satisfaction is go ahead and add our olive oil, and then we'll give that a mix for about a minute to infuse that oil with all that goodness. And by the way, if you don't have one of these, well, you really should get one. But if you don't have one currently, you can do this in a blender. You're just not going to extract the same flavor as you do in the mortar. And then what we'll do once our garlic herb oil mixture's set is transfer that into our breadcrumbs, just good old-fashioned plain dry breadcrumbs. And then once that's transferred in, we'll go ahead and add the rest of the ingredients, which will include some more salt, some freshly ground black pepper, and a little bit of cayenne, just because. We can also add the rest of our freshly chopped parsley. And then last but not least, we'll do a little bit of freshly grated Parmesan cheese. And please use the real stuff. It goes by the name Parmigiano Reggiano. And then once we have everything together, we'll take a fork and give it a mix. And by the way, as usual, this is a technique, not necessarily a recipe. So if you want to tweak this mixture with different herbs and spices, go ahead. You are, after all, the RuPaul of your Prawn Provencale. So you go ahead and add whatever you think will make this more fabulous. But anyway, we'll give this a mix with the fork. We also need to check to make sure we have enough oil. So what I like to do is give it a mix and then kind of feel it with my fingers. And if it feels a little bit dry, which this did, we'll simply drizzle in a little more olive oil and give it another mix until we think it's perfect. And right here is exactly what we're shooting for. Okay, if we press some of this onto a finger, it will stick. So that's looking good right there. And then what we'll do once that's done is set it aside and move on to the prawns. And what we're going to need to do to prep these is remove the shell, but not the tail. So what some people like to do to play it safe is to remove that piece of shell just below the tail. And then once that's separated, they'll continue on, moving down the shrimp, removing the rest of the shell. So that's one way, and while that does take a little longer, it is kind of safe because you're less likely to accidentally pull off the tail. But here's another way that's a little faster, and I think I prefer it, but it is a little more dangerous. And that's to use your thumb to scrape down across the legs. And then we'll go the other direction, removing the shell from the thick part up to the tail. So this is a little faster, but you got to be careful when you get to the end that you don't pull off the tail. That's going to act as our handle. And then once our prawns are peeled, we have to butterfly them, which is totally different than how we usually do it, because we normally make a cut about halfway in along the back here. But to butterfly shrimp, you have to go in the other side, okay, the underbelly. And we'll cut right down the length, but do not go through, especially on the end here. Okay, we want to cut through that flesh just down to the skin, so that the shrimp opens up, but is still attached in the center. So 1 down and 1,000 to go. Sorry, just had a catering flashback. And of course, once butterflied, if you see a vein and need to pull it out, go ahead. But anyway, let's try that one more time, even though I'm going to edit this one down. So instead of cutting into the back, we're going to cut into the underbelly, and we will slice that lengthwise, but again, do not go all the way through. And be especially careful when you're near the end. Okay, so go a little bit slow till you get the hang of it. And then once our shrimp are prepped and our crumbs are made, all the hard work is over. And it's probably obvious, but I'll tell you anyway, both those components can be prepped ahead of time, which is very much recommended. We can't be greeting guests with shrimp hands. So ideally, you're doing that earlier in the day. And then what we'll do once we do want to move into final production is line a sheet pan with foil, and we'll give it a nice light brushing with some olive oil. And then once that's set, we will apply our crumb mixture to our prawns as shown. Okay, I like to press on a whole bunch to start, and then kind of shake that off, and then maybe reapply a little bit more. Because what we're shooting for here is the surface of that prawn is totally coated with crumbs, but just a nice light layer. We don't want it all piled up. Otherwise, the edges of those crumbs aren't going to crisp up in the oven. So we'll apply a very generous amount of crumbs, and then sort of let it fall off, applying more if necessary, until they are lightly but thoroughly coated. And once that's done, if you see a few spots that need a little extra, go ahead and give it a little extra pinch. And then once our prawns have been crumbed and panned, they are ready for the oven, in a very hot oven. So let's go ahead and transfer those into the center of a 475-degree oven for about 8 to 10 minutes or so, depends on the size, or until they're cooked through and looking something like this. Check it out. Hey, are those prawns done or just happy to see me? So yes, once cooked through, those tails should be standing straight up. And because we use such a hot oven, some of those crumbs should have crisped up nicely. So these are looking just about perfect. Except, for whatever reason, 1 out of every 12 does not assume the proper shape, and instead turns into what we call in the business a humpback prawn. And the frustrating thing is, nobody knows why this happens. I mean, scientists have been studying this for decades, and have absolutely no idea. So I'm going to go ahead and eat that one, after which I served up the rest next to some lemon aioli. And that's it. What I'm calling Prawn Provencale is done. And of course, crispy, garlicky, herby breadcrumbs are good on almost everything. But when you combine it with the sweetness of that prawn, it is an absolutely perfect combination. And by the way, I know it drives some of you crazy when I double dip, but it's fine. My guests are in the other room. No one can see this. But anyway, that's it, what I'm calling Prawn Provencale. And sure, butterflying all those prawns does take a little bit of time, but I think the resulting appearance and taste is more than worth it. And they've been one of my go-to hot hors d'oeuvres for a long time. My only regret here is I didn't use a roasted red pepper aioli, which I think would have made for a more attractive presentation. But you know what? That's fine. Life's too short for regrets, especially in the kitchen. But anyway, I realize you're here for recipes, not for life coaching. So with that, let me finish up by saying I really do hope you give this a try soon. Head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy. Barbecue shrimp. That's right, I'm doing my take on this indigenous American shellfish dish. And while usually I'm the one giving things the wrong name, this time it was the lovely and talented people of New Orleans who decided to call this barbecue shrimp, even though it really has nothing to do with barbecue. But what it does have something to do with is being incredibly delicious. So here is what we're going to do. We need about 1.5 pounds of what they call colossal shrimp, which is kind of funny because, as some of you found out, calling something that's only 4 inches long colossal usually doesn't work out. But anyway, that's the official name for these because they come 15 to a pound. And I'm also using ones that are called easy peel, which means they've been split down the back, which makes removing the exoskeleton very simple. So the only place it's really attached is down by the tail. So I just take my fingernails and peel that little piece off. I try to get all that tail meat out intact. And then once you've peeled that part of the shell, the rest will come right off. And not only are these easy peel shrimp easier to peel, they're also deveined. So very easy to work with. So bottom line, you're going to peel and devein your shrimp. You're going to separate the shells into a saucepan and reserve those. And of course, the shrimp you can throw right in a mixing bowl. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take the shrimp and drizzle over about 1.5 tablespoons or so of some kind of vegetable oil, something neutral. And then we're going to season this up. And the first thing we're going to add here is a ton of freshly and coarsely ground black pepper. I'm also going to put in a little bit of paprika. I'm using smoked paprika, a little shake of cayenne, and then last but not least, a little bit of Old Bay. Please do not substitute with a young bay. And then we're going to mix that up. And when it's tossed and combined thoroughly, I'm going to throw a piece of plastic over that. And we're going to let that sit in the fridge for at least an hour. We want that shrimp to start absorbing those flavors.
So you can leave it in the fridge for at least an hour. A couple hours is fine. I guess overnight would be okay, although I've never tried that. And while that's chilling, we're going to go back over to the stove and make a shrimp stock, which is so simple. So I had you put all your shrimp shells in a saucepan, and we're going to place that over medium-high heat with a little chunk of butter. And we're just going to saute that for a minute or two until the shells turn pink. And even more so than color, you can go by smell here. When that smells like awesome sauteed shrimp, it's done. So cook it for a minute or two until it turns pink and smells awesome. And then we're going to dump in about 2 cups of liquid. I'm using chicken stock. You can use water, but I do like the chicken stock if I have it. And then all we're going to do is wait for that to come up to a simmer, turn it down to low, and just let it simmer on the back of the stove for about 20 minutes, okay? And a little bit will evaporate, but that's fine. And in about 20 minutes or a half hour, you should have a very beautiful and fully flavored shrimp stock. At that point, just go ahead and strain that into a bowl. And after that's been strained, we're going to go ahead and add the rest of the wet ingredients, which is the juice of a lemon, freshly squeezed, of course. Come on. We're also going to need some Worcestershire sauce, and then a few shakes of hot sauce. Anything from Louisiana will work. And then we're going to mix that up, and that's it. And at this point, I believe all our components are ready. So here's what I'm thinking. We're going to take the shrimp, and we're going to sear those in a really, really hot pan. At that point, we're going to add a bunch of butter, some freshly chopped rosemary, and a ton of minced garlic. We'll cook that a little bit, and then we'll finish it with our shrimp stock mixture. Okay, so if everyone's good with that, let's go over to the stove where we've placed our largest frying pan on high heat, and we need to preheat that like super, super hot. This literally can't be too hot. And when you're sure it's been preheated, we're going to go ahead and place in the shrimp. No oil in it, dry pan. Remember, the shrimp's coated in oil. We don't need any oil in this. And we're just going to give this first side 1 minute of searing. And if your pan was hot enough, 1 minute is all it should take to get a really beautiful sear on that first side. All right, you can see here. We're going to go ahead and turn those over. Again, the heat's on the highest it will go. Oh, and by the way, this is why you want to use large shrimp, so you can get a really beautiful sear on them before they overcook. All right, so we're going to flip all those over. And as soon as those get turned, we're going to quickly throw in our butter, which you can see I've cut into small chunks. So toss in the butter, toss in the garlic, toss in the rosemary, and we're just going to cook this for 1 minute. So take your tongs, give it a stir. We do not want to brown the garlic. All right, slightly golden's fine, brown is not. So 1 minute should be fine. The brownness you see at the bottom of the pan is not the garlic. That's the caramelization from the shrimp. So relax, that was fine. And after a 1 minute stir and sizzle, we're going to quickly pour in our shrimp stock, which of course is going to deglaze the pan. And this recipe is pretty much done. Now what you can do is just let this boil and reduce for a few minutes and serve it. But what I like to do is remove the shrimp and reserve them and reduce the sauce without the shrimp in it. Because the fear is overcooking the shrimp while you finish the sauce. And by removing it, you don't have to worry about that. So I'm just going to scoop those out onto a plate or in a bowl. And then I'm simply going to boil the sauce until it slightly thickens. Of course, the more you reduce it, the more intense the flavor gets. All right, the spicier and saltier it's going to be. Speaking of salt, be careful seasoning. The Worcestershire sauce is salty. In fact, you may want to put in the Worcestershire at the end so you can kind of taste for the salt. But bottom line, you're just trying to reduce the sauce till it thickens slightly. And then once that's happened and you've tasted for seasoning, reduce the heat to low. Go ahead and dump your shrimp back in. Give them a stir till they're warm through, which is just going to take a minute. And then spoon that up on some rice. And you are in store for one of the great, great American shellfish recipes of all time. I mean, look at that. Barbecue shrimp. And because we used it in the sauce, it's completely legal to garnish with a rosemary sprig. Just a gorgeous looking and tasting dish. And again, this is my version. I believe the authentic version has approximately 14 times more butter. But still, this was incredibly delicious. And all those big flavors just work so well together. The garlic, the rosemary, the black pepper, the spice. Just a beautiful combination. And even the plain rice with that sauce on it is incredible. And of course, usually I say serve this on whatever you want. In this case, no. No, you're not the boss of your barbecued shrimp bases. You will serve this over white rice and like it. So to wrap things up here, I'd say the 2 secrets: try to get the largest shrimp you can get and take the couple extra minutes to make that shrimp stock. But anyway, if you're a fan of shrimp or just incredibly delicious things in general, I really hope you give this a try. Head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy. Creamy garlic shrimp toast. That's right, this incredibly delicious recipe would be good on so many different things, like pasta, rice, potato, just to name a few. But to me, enjoying this on a nice piece of bread that we've pan toasted in butter is the best way to go. And not only is this dish incredibly tasty and easy, once we have everything prepped, it only takes like 5 minutes to cook start to finish. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. And the first thing we should prep is our shrimp. And for this, we're going to need some raw, peeled and deveined shrimp. Okay, so do not accidentally buy the cooked shrimp. That will not work for this. And if we're using some nice big shrimp like this, I like to do what's called butterfly them, which means cutting them in half with our knife held parallel to the cutting board like this. And not only is that going to give these a very cool appearance once they're cooked, but we're creating lots of surface area. And as you know, when it comes to cooking, surface area means flavor. And like I said, I'm doing this because I'm using large shrimp, sold as 16/20s, meaning they're 16 to 22 a pound. But if you happen to be using small shrimp, you probably don't even have to do this. And if you don't feel comfortable cutting it like I'm showing you here, you can, if you want, hold it like this instead and cut down. All right, maybe you'll find that a little easier. But bottom line, if you don't cut yourself, your technique was excellent. And then what we'll do once we have those raw shrimp sliced in half and transferred into some kind of mixing bowl is that we will season those up with a few shakes of cayenne, as well as a little bit of smoked paprika, which I like to refer to as the bacon of spices, since it gives us a little touch of smoky sweetness. And we don't have to bother any pigs to do it. And then we'll finish this up with a whole bunch of crushed or finely minced garlic. And we will stir that in until these shrimp are evenly coated. And for 2 portions, which is what I'm making here, I think we want at least 3 nice big cloves of garlic. But as usual, exact amounts are up to you, since you're the one that's going to eat this. But personally, I don't think we want to be shy with the garlic, since it is in the name of the dish after all. And then what we'll do once that's been mixed up is cover it in plastic, and we'll pop that in the fridge until we're ready to use it. And once that's set, we can move on to zesting a lemon, which of course means using a microplane to remove only the yellow part from the skin, which of course is where all that beautiful lemon flavor is. And then besides the zest, once we're done, we'll cut that lemon in half, and we will juice 1/2, which is going to give us about 2 tablespoons of juice. And then besides our 2 forms of lemon, we'll also want to do a little bit of freshly chopped Italian parsley, as well as measure out a 1/2 cup of heavy cream. And that's going to be pretty much it for our ingredients, except for the all-important toast. And for that, I'm going to use a couple nice big thick slices of French bread. Okay, at least 3/4 of an inch to an inch thick. And then once we have that sliced, I'm going to do something I almost never do, and that is trim most of the crust off the bread. And I'm not doing that because I think I'm too good for crust, like those rich people in that movie. But the reason I'm doing this is simply to make for a little more luxurious experience when we eat this. Since when we pan fry this bread and butter, that already tough crust does get a little bit tougher, and we just have to end up doing a little more work to cut through it. Which really is no big deal, but I just don't want any distractions, no matter how ridiculously minor, to get in the way of me enjoying my creamy garlic shrimp toast. So I will be trimming. You suit yourself. And then once our bread's set, we're ready to toast it in some clarified butter, which we make by melting some whole butter, which I do in the microwave. And then once it's melted, all we have to do is spoon that light foamy stuff off the top, which is basically the milky part of the butter. And once we skim that off, we'll just be left with that beautiful golden butter fat, also known in the business as clarified butter. Oh, and please note there will be a little bit of watery liquid at the bottom, which is basically the whey, and we don't want to mix that in. So all we want to do is spoon off this beautiful golden oil. And for our toast, we will transfer about 4 tablespoons of that into a pan set over medium heat, and we will toast our bread in that butter on both sides to a beautiful golden brown. And if 4 tablespoons sounds like too much, it's not. And to prove it, I'm going to spoon a little more over the top. But anyway, we'll go ahead and toast that on both sides. And why did I reach for one piece and then decide to turn the other? I have no idea. Although maybe I thought that one piece was darker, so I decided to turn it first. But who knows? And yes, as we toast it, that bread is going to absorb most of the butter, which is totally fine and exactly what we want. And that's it. Once our bread has been toasted to a beautiful golden brown on both sides, we'll go ahead and remove those to a plate, and we will set those aside until we're ready to smother those in our creamy garlic shrimp, which we're going to do in the same pan. And if we happen to see any crumbs of bread, we should probably remove those, since it's going to get pretty hot, and we don't want those to burn and have an off flavor. At which point we'll add a few more tablespoons of clarified butter in, and we'll place this over high heat, and we will let it get very, very hot. And since we are using clarified butter,
We don't have to worry about those milk solids burning, which is one of the big advantages of clarified butter. And then what we'll do when we see that very first wisp of smoke is quickly transfer in our shrimp, and we will use our tongs to spread those out as evenly as we can. And then once that's been accomplished, what we'll do is let that shrimp sear on high heat for about 1 minute. And during that time, it's very important we don't stir or toss these. And for a dish like this, a really good sear on a little bit is better than a bad sear on a lot of it, which is what would happen if we started to stir this around. So let's just let that bottom surface sear, which will result in a deeper, more shrimpier flavor. And that's going to work out better flavor-wise than if we tried to sear everything. And at any point while that's happening, we can go ahead and toss in our lemon zest. And then after about a minute or so of searing, you'll notice those shrimp pieces that were probably stuck will have started to release from the pan, and you should at this point be smelling a gorgeous roasted shrimp aroma, and a very garlicky one at that. And if you're thinking that searing on one side sounds fine, but how are the tops of the shrimps going to get cooked? Well, that's all going to happen in the couple minutes it takes to make our sauce. Since what we'll do at this point is dump in our lemon juice, followed by our heavy cream, and then we'll grab a spoon and give everything a stir, making sure we're scraping and deglazing any of that deliciousness off the bottom. And then what's going to happen over the course of the next 1.5 to 2 minutes, that cream is going to start to boil and reduce, and it'll start to thicken up. And by the time it does, if everything's gone according to plan, our shrimp is finished cooking perfectly, at which point we are pretty much done. Okay, all we need to do to finish this is turn off the heat, and we will stir in our freshly chopped Italian parsley. And basically, as soon as that's been mixed in, and we've checked the seasoning and we're happy with how this tastes, we are officially done. And no, we didn't put any salt in yet, and quite often with shrimp we don't need to. But of course we'll check just in case. And that's it, we'll go ahead and serve that up on our toast, which we can just do by spooning it over. But I went with the tongs approach for the shrimp, so I can get those piled up just how I want. And how I want is so everything's on the toast. And once I had half the shrimp on, I went ahead and spooned over half the sauce. And I cannot begin to explain how excited I was to tear into this. But before that, I had to finish with a little bit of parsley, and then set it on a placemat so I could take some contractually obligated pictures. But then I grabbed a fork and knife and went to town. And so I don't pull a muscle. I'm going to start off slow and easy and just taste one piece of shrimp, which was creamy, garlicky, and unbelievably delicious. All right, that, my friends, is some of the best garlic shrimp you'll ever taste. But please do not eat the shrimp alone. We will, of course, enjoy that with our buttery pan-toasted bread, which, as you might imagine, is just a fantastic combination. And yes, I'm still trying to figure out how to use a knife and fork, as I hold the bread with the knife and cut with the fork. But that works too. And as I was enjoying this, I was thinking we might have to start doing garlic bread soaked in cream. I mean, I like regular garlic bread, but this stuff was ridiculous. And when you add in that sweet shrimp, and that subtle hint of smoky paprika, and that little touch of lemon, I really could not have been happier with how this came out. But like I said, if you want to do this on rice or noodles, go for it. I mean, you are, after all, the Chef John of what to put this on. But personally, I have to have the toast. And as you might have noticed, because we butterflied all those shrimp, when they cook, they curl up into the most adorable shape. Okay, sort of a little corkscrew, which just does an absolutely magnificent job of holding on to that amazing sauce. Not to mention looks very cool. Oh, and I should mention this exact same technique with this exact same sauce on the exact same toast will work with other kinds of shellfish and seafood. Right, you could do this with scallops or lobster or crayfish or crawfish or crawdads or craydads. But anyway, you get the idea. This is not just a recipe, this is a technique. But whether you make it with something else or with some nice big shrimp like I did here, either way, I really do hope you give this a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.
Grilled garlic and herb shrimp. That's right, don't let the generic name fool you. This is one of the finest grilled seafood recipes in all the land. And since we just showed you how to plant your own herb garden, I thought we'd post a video that really illustrates how awesome it is to have those fresh herbs around. So let's go ahead and get started with the marinade,
where we'll be using 4 of those herbs. We're going to go with some basil, some oregano, and I have 2 kinds, Greek and Italian. And we're also going to do some Italian parsley and some lemon thyme. Oh man, is that stuff good on grilled seafood. And above and beyond the fresh herbs and garlic, one of the real secrets to this recipe is to use a mortar and pestle to make the marinade. And I'll go into detail about this amazing tool on the blog. But for now, let's just go ahead and prep these herbs for processing. And all that's going to entail is taking the leaves off the stems, which is very easy for everything other than the thyme, which does take a minute or 2 to strip those little leaves off. And yes, when you first start your career as a prep cook in a kitchen, picking thyme leaves is one of the first jobs they give you, because everybody hates to do it. But it really isn't that bad, and when you taste these, the effort will be well worth it. So we'll go ahead and we'll pick our herbs, at which point we can move on to making the rest of this mixture. So first up, into the mortar, we're going to place some kosher salt, followed by just a little bit of lemon zest, and then more than a little sliced garlic. That was about 3 cloves. And what we'll do before we add our herbs is give this a little crushing first. So we'll grab the pestle and we'll give this the old smasha. And we don't really need to go too fine. We just want to get this started. So go ahead and pound that until you have something that looks like this. And at this point, we can add in our herbs, but not like this. Very critical, we're going to have to cut them up a little bit first. Just start with the biggest basil leaves and kind of use those to wad everything together. And once we have a nice tight package, we can take a sharp knife and slice across this way, and then the other way. And we'll give that a little chop. And it may seem a little odd that we're chopping this before crushing it, but it only takes a couple seconds and really does work a lot better. So we will add in our herbs, and we will give that a crushing. And I'm not going to stop the camera here, but at home, all that herb you see flying out, you're going to want to put back in. And I believe I mentioned earlier that the mortar and pestle is kind of key here, and it really is. While you can get something that looks similar to this with a food processor or a blender, you'll just never be able to achieve the same flavor. So in other words, if you want to crush this, you have to crush this. But anyway, we're going to crush those herbs into that garlic mixture until we have something pretty fine. I mean, we're not going for a total paste here, but basically something that looks like this. At which point we can add the last ingredient, the olive oil. But we're not going to add all of it. We're just going to start with a drizzle, and we'll mix that in first before adding the rest. And the reason is when you're working with a mortar and pestle, the rule of thumb is the thicker the mixture, the easier it is to crush. So we'll just start with a little splash, and we'll grind all that together for about a minute. And once it's been crushed to about this point, we can stop and add in the rest. And as you can see, I'm also switching to the freakishly small wooden spoon. And basically, we're just adding in enough oil to achieve the proper thickness, which I think should be right about here. And believe it or not, that's it. Our garlic and herb marinade is done. So we'll set that aside while we go ahead and grab our shrimp. And what we have here is a couple pounds of peeled and deveined 1620s, which are the size I'm recommending here. And all 1620 means is that's how many come to a pound. So in my opinion, for this recipe, the bigger the shrimp, the better. And at this point, we want to coat our shrimp with our herb mixture, but not all of it. We only want to add in 2/3 at this point. We must save 1/3 to finish the dish with. So we just want to transfer in about 2/3 of that mixture, and then we'll grab a spoonula or something similar and give this a very, very thorough mixing. All right, shrimp are famous for their nooks and crannies. So you really do want to make sure you get in there and get in there good until these are all perfectly coated. And then once that's set, what we'll do is we'll transfer that into a plastic bag because we want to let these marinate in the fridge for at least a couple hours. And of course, you want to transfer this in carefully so you don't spill anything. Whoops. But anyway, we'll transfer that into a zip-top bag and transfer that into the fridge for 3 hours. And what if you go for a little less or a little more? It'll probably be fine. And we will also wrap up the last third of that marinade because we're going to need that for later. Of course, plastic wrap does not stick to wood, which is why I like to steal those little shower caps from hotels and motels and use that instead. But that's another video. So like I said, we're going to let our shrimp marinate for about 3 hours, at which point those are ready to skewer. And I will be using the metal ones for these, but some soaked bamboo skewers will also work. And we will use the standard once through the small part, once through the big part method, which is pretty basic. I would be lying if I said skewering shrimp was hard. And I'm going to do 4 of these, because apparently I only have 4 skewers. But don't worry, I'll cook those later. So our shrimp have been skewered, and at this point they're ready to cook. And I highly recommend you do that on a very, very hot charcoal grill. What about gas grills? Not a big fan. But anything hot will work. And the reason I want a very, very hot fire is because I'm going for some serious caramelization. Oh, I've never met a grill mark I didn't like. So a lot of grilled shrimp recipes recommend medium heat, but that is not me. I want very intense heat, very close to the shrimp. But anyway, I cooked those for a few minutes per side until they were just barely cooked through and looking awesome, at which point we'll pull those off the grill. And if everything's gone according to plan, you should be looking at one of the most beautiful platters of grilled shrimp you've ever seen. And at this point, we're ready to serve, but wait. We have one last step to do. We have to take that third of the herb mixture we saved and use that to make a quick sauce to go over the top. So let's go ahead and transfer the rest of that mixture into a mixing bowl, to which we'll add some red pepper flakes. I'm using Aleppo pepper, but just red chili flakes will work. I'm also going to give it a little pinch of cayenne. You know that's good for you. As well as some freshly squeezed lemon juice. And one last drizzle of olive oil. Then we'll take a whisk and we'll give that a mix. And in just a few short seconds, you're going to be looking at a very gorgeous and incredibly delicious sauce to finish our shrimp with. So let's go ahead and spoon that over our shrimp, which as you can see have been transferred to a more geometrically appropriate platter. And we will spoon that over. And seriously, how good does that look? And then we finish these off with a few wedges of lemon. And right as I did, the light from the setting sun started being filtered through our neighbor's windblown tree, which caused the light to flicker, which when it comes to photography is a huge problem. But when it comes to everything else, the opposite of that. So I just went with it, and instead of being annoyed, I decided to enjoy it. So I went in for the official taste, and these really were magnificent. Just such a perfect combination with that sweet, caramelized, smoky shrimp, that fresh, aromatic brightness of the herb, and of course a big punch of garlic. And obviously, if you want to use some different herbs, go ahead. So things like dill or tarragon would also be beautiful in this. But of course, that's up to you. You are the peaches of your herbs, so use whatever you like. But anyway, that's it. Grilled garlic and herb shrimp. So delicious, so simple, so easy. Especially if you have all those herbs growing for free in your backyard. All right? So I really do hope you give this a try. Head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.